A threat to Canadian unity appears to be growing in Alberta. A separatist group confirms that it met with U.S. officials.
Hope, prosperity for our children, for their futures, because right now in Canada it's a sinking ship.
People in Alberta's biggest city waiting to add their names to a conversation about the province's future.
You know, I'm confident we're going to get it done. Like, we're well on our way to the 1 million signature goal that we set for this campaign.
Alberta and Saskatchewan just went all the way on 51st to 52nd Statehood. Carney explodes, ends at U.S. officials. Alberta and Saskatchewan just crossed a line nobody in Ottawa thought they would. While federal politicians were busy arguing on panels, people in Western Canada walked out into freezing January nights to start the legal process to leave Canada. Yes, they openly cracked the door to becoming the 51st and 52nd states of the United States, and the whole country is scrambling now.
Alberta would be better off if we separated from the rest of Canada.
That's not a symbolic act or a message. That's a decision. People stood in the cold with clipboards and pens, quietly, seriously, putting their names down to trigger a legal exit. Just long lines of people saying, "We're done waiting for permission." That's how this stopped being a conversation and became a process. That's the moment this went from talk to action.
We're not being treated fairly. And the only way we're going to make a change is by demanding basically our independence.
Because countries don't always crack with riots. Sometimes they crack with paperwork. Sometimes it's not a revolution on TV. It's neighbors lining up after work in the dark to sign their way out. That's exactly what Ottawa didn't see coming. While federal leaders were still playing politics, Western Canada was building an exit ramp with deadlines, filings, and legal language. That's why this feels different. This isn't anger blowing off steam. This is anger getting organized. And the key to that organization is Bill 14.
I'm kind of tired to see the Easterner basically having the pleasure of shitting on Alberta, blocking everything that we want to do.
Been lining up since about 11 o'clock this morning, coming in to sign that petition. Organizers telling me just minutes ago about 650 people were lined up here before 11 a.m. this morning. Organizers need about 177,000 signatures for this petition to be successful.
Once Bill 14 passed and got royal assent on April 8th, everything changed. This stopped being a movement and became a legal machine. Filings went straight to Elections Alberta. That's where emotion turns into enforcement. That's where frustration becomes a clock. Now there's a hard number, 177,732 signatures. By May 2nd.
So Alberta and Saskatchewan, they're oil and gas titans, but pipeline cancellations, tightening of regulations, tax grabs from Ottawa, they've hammered their economies. So we're seeing billions in energy revenues flow eastward, while Westerners see their jobs, their industries, and their ambitions blocked by liberal cities like Montreal, thousands of miles away.
That number is Ottawa's nightmare, because you can spin outrage, you can dismiss rallies, you can wait out trending topics, but you can't wait out a deadline, and this clock wasn't started by Ottawa. That's the part that really hurts. Western Canada started it. Now the federal government is reacting instead of controlling. That flips the power dynamic. Even worse for them, Alberta didn't invent a loophole. They used Ottawa's own rules.
And it's precisely what almost happened back in 1995 when Quebec came within 1.1 percentage point of seceding from the Confederation.
This whole process is built on the same legal framework Ottawa created for Quebec, the Clarity Act, the same logic, the same structure. That means Ottawa can't just wave it away without exposing itself. If they say this process isn't legitimate, they're also saying their own federal standard is meaningless. That's a trap of their own making. Then there's the referendum question itself, and this is where it gets brutal for the federal government. The wording is simple, clean, and direct.
The question being asked is, do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada to become an independent state?
Do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada and become an independent state?
Supporters say they've been on the losing end of federal policy.
Continually giving to the have-not provinces and never having pipelines, just always giving.
This forces a choice. Either Ottawa respects the process they created, or they admit the rules only apply when it's convenient. That's not just a political problem. That's a credibility problem. And credibility is everything in a federation.
Because I've had enough. I started my work career under Pierre Elliott Trudeau prior to the NEP, and I've seen nothing but destruction.
That's why this is bigger than one province. This is about whether Canada's system actually means what it says. If a province follows the federal playbook and Ottawa still refuses to engage, then every province is watching. Every region is learning a lesson. The lesson isn't about Alberta. It's about whether the rules are real. That's also why Saskatchewan changes the entire equation.
If Saskatchewan or Alberta were simply to declare themselves independent states, and other states were to recognize them as independent states, and the government of Canada ceased to have any control over Saskatchewan, Alberta, it may be that de facto they would become independent states as a matter of international law.
When Saskatchewan joins, this becomes uncontainable. One province can be isolated. Two provinces with coordinated legal processes, shared grievances, and combined economic weight become something else entirely. That's no longer a regional headache. That's a structural threat.
We're contracting with folks in America to tell our story, that this whole Canadian political narrative that Canadians don't want to be the 51st state is that's just simply not true.
Together, Alberta and Saskatchewan represent millions of people and a massive share of Canada's real economic engine. Energy, agriculture, potash, oil, and wheat. These aren't symbolic industries. These are the pipes and wires that move money through the country. What really freaked Ottawa out is how fast this scaled. Over 30 events in a single month, more than 2,000 registered volunteers. That's not enthusiasm, that's infrastructure. That's logistics. That's people coordinating schedules, locations, sign-up sheets, training, and transportation.
I feel pretty good. Why? I use my voice. Willing to stand for what I stand for, and it feels really good.
That's a machine. Movements are loud. Machines are quiet and efficient. Machines just keep running whether anyone's paying attention or not. And once a machine is built, it doesn't disappear when the news cycle changes. It just keeps collecting signatures. That's why this feels different. Ottawa knows how to handle protests. They don't know how to handle a well-organized, legally focused grassroots operation that looks more like a campaign than a complaint. And then you layer in the youth vote, and that's where things get really uncomfortable for the people in charge.
Most of my paycheck either goes to rent or bills and hardly for food anymore.
And you think a referendum vote for Albertans will actually change things?
It will, because most of the taxes will actually stay in Alberta.
Because the polling tells a story Ottawa does not want to hear. Overall support for independence sits around 31%. That alone is enough to make politicians nervous. But the real number that makes people choke on their coffee is this. Among 18 to 34-year-olds, support jumps to around 40%. That's not a protest generation. That's a replacement generation. That means this isn't something that's going to fade away with time. It's something that grows stronger as older voters age out and younger voters age in. That's a demographic time bomb.
It's a demonstration of democracy, and they have the opportunity to make their voice heard. I think it's a reflection that there are people who feel disenfranchised, be it by the federal government, be it by our friends to the south, and maybe all this is coming together at the right time for them to make their opinion known.
Young people aren't just mad, they're making long-term decisions based on a system they think is broken. Housing feels impossible, education feels expensive, wages fall behind, and Ottawa looks like a roadblock, not a solution. That's where the idea of mental separation comes in. Political separation usually happens after people have already emotionally and mentally checked out. By the time the ballot shows up, the decision has already been made in people's heads.
So we can have our vote and have our voices heard. And I think we got enough people, somebody's going to pay attention.
And now Saskatchewan steps in and changes the entire geometry of this thing. One province is a problem. Two provinces is a crisis. Saskatchewan's prosperity group barely existed weeks ago. Now they're organizing town halls across the province. Saskatoon, Swift Current, Prince Albert, and Meadow Lake. That's not symbolic. That's territory coverage. That's the map lighting up. When two provinces move together, Ottawa can't just isolate one and squeeze it. The math changes. Together, Alberta and Saskatchewan represent about 6.9 million people and over $350 billion in GDP. That's roughly 22% of Canada's economic power.
We have seen with his predecessors, many of the cabinet ministers who were at the table then are going to be at the table now. They had overly aggressive targets that were unachievable.
That's not a fringe region. That's the heartbeat of the country. If that heartbeat starts talking about leaving, the whole body feels it. And then you get to the real leverage. The stuff that makes finance people sit up straight. Together, Alberta and Saskatchewan account for about 98% of Canada's oil production. Saskatchewan dominates global potash. Wheat flows out of these provinces into global markets. These aren't optional industries. These are structural. You can't just replace that overnight. You can't just reroute that easily. If those flows get disrupted, contracts shake, prices move, supply chains get weird, investors get nervous. That's why this isn't just political leverage, it's economic leverage.
I'm sick of our government. So it's time to separate. It's like a bad marriage. I'm tired of giving my money away.
I'm tired of the husband making all the money, being Alberta, and the dipsticks taking it all, without recognizing that the work that we're doing is really what's supporting Canada.
Western Canada isn't asking politely, it's holding the breaker switch. That's the quiet power behind all of this. Ottawa can argue policy, it can spin narratives, but it can't magically replace oil, potash, and wheat. That's what makes this so serious. This isn't just about identity or culture or politics. It's about who controls the engines that make the country run. And when the people who control those engines start building legal exits, that's when a protest becomes a pressure point. And that's when Ottawa stops managing a problem and starts managing a threat.
Like Canada, we love Canada, but we are unsatisfied with the situation, with the policies.
We want independence from the rest of the Canada. I mean, everybody here probably loves the country.
People out west no longer see equalization as fair. They see it as funding political loyalty in other regions, while their own bridges are patched rather than replaced. They see their money propping up systems they have no control over. That's not abstract policy. That's personal. That's why the anger sticks. Because people can handle hardship. What they can't handle is feeling used. And nowhere does that hit harder than in rural Canada. Farmers are getting crushed from every angle. The carbon tax alone costs many farmers around $1,500 a year. That's not symbolic. That's a tractor payment. Diesel is up about 47% since 2019. You don't negotiate with diesel prices. You either pay it or your equipment doesn't move. Then comes the fertilizer policy. Ottawa wants emissions from fertilizer cut by 30% by 2030. Farm experts say that means crop yields drop 10 to 15%. That's not a small hit. That's the difference between profit and loss. In some regions, operating costs have jumped up to 400%. That's not inflation, that's financial suffocation. Ranchers are selling cattle just to keep the lights on. Farmers are being told how to farm by people who've never touched a combine, never fixed a fence, never waited on rain.
We need to go with the U.S. and we need to work with the whole family's here. We need to work with the oil and go all the way down to Texas.
Ends at Texas. That's why rural anger feels different. It's not ideological, it's survival. When someone 3,000 kilometers away tells you how to run on land they've never walked on, separation stops sounding radical. It starts sounding practical. Then you get to pipelines. This is where Western Canada stops seeing Ottawa as a partner and begins to see it as a competitor.
So why would a majority of Albertans think separation could happen if only a minority actually wanted to? I mean, there's always been an element at the fringes with an appetite for the idea. What's changed?
Energy East cancelled. Northern Gateway killed. Trans Mountain's cost rose from $7.4 billion to over $30 billion due to delays and chaos. While all that happened, Western Oil continued to sell at a $15 to $30 discount to US oil. That discount costs the region about $20 billion every year. That's wealth being quietly drained, but access is blocked. The oil is there, the demand is there, the only thing missing is permission. That's why people say Ottawa is acting like Alberta's biggest competitor. Federal policy doesn't just regulate, it devalues Western resources. It keeps product trapped. It keeps prices low. That's not partnership, that's suppression. And while politicians argue, the markets are already making their move.
Alberta would be better off if we separated from the rest of Canada.
After Bill 14 passed, the Canadian dollar dropped. Alberta bonds started getting priced with extra risk. Investors don't wait for speeches. They price risk before politicians admit it exists. On top of that, estimates say $80 to $85 billion in capital has left Canada since Carney took over. Money doesn't care about press releases. Money cares about stability. When money starts moving, it's usually because it sees something coming. That's the part people miss. Markets often vote before people do. By the time voters show up, the money has already made its decision. Then Washington enters the chat. This is where the story gets awkward for Ottawa. Leaders of the independence movement have met with U.S. officials. American industry groups are publicly commenting. The U.S. Oil and Gas Association openly posted support. Not quietly, publicly. The U.S. already imports about $156 billion in Canadian energy. Saskatchewan controls massive potash supply. Agriculture between the two countries is worth tens of billions. From Washington's perspective, Western Canada isn't a problem. It's a strategic asset. That's why this conversation isn't being laughed off in the US. It's being analyzed.
Quite frankly, I think the people of Alberta would agree with that sentiment, that they would prefer not to be a part of Canada and be a part of the United States because we are winning day in and day out.
Then the 51st to 52nd state talks up, and people think it's a joke, until they realize it's being discussed as a strategy, not a meme. 3 scenarios are on the table. Independent but economically tied to the US territory, or full statehood. Whether any of that happens is a separate question. What matters is that it's being talked about seriously. That alone is leverage.
If we did become Americans, maybe we might be better off.
The moment Ottawa loses its monopoly over Western Canada's future, power shifts. Even talking about alternatives changes negotiations. It tells investors, governments, and industries that the map is no longer fixed. That's why Carney's reaction looks like panic. Emergency trips west, special funding packages, rapid policy announcements. When governments move that fast, it's not confidence, it's damage control. Leaders don't rush unless they think something real is happening. That's the tell. And underneath all of this is something even more powerful: mental secession.
Did they mention Alberta's oil? Nothing. It's lumber, there's steel down, what about us? It's our money.
People are already planning their lives like separation is possible. Businesses are thinking cross-border first. Communities are talking logistics, not slogans. That's the real point of no return. Political separation almost always comes after mental separation. By the time a vote happens, most people have already decided in their heads. That's what makes this moment dangerous for Canada as a system. If you have come this far, like this video and hit the subscribe button to get more updates.